Hi, my name's Chris Bowes. I'm an audiologist and a hearing aid dispenser. Today I'm going to talk to you about the brain and how it processes speech in background noise. So we're going to start off, and I want you to imagine you're in a coffee shop or at a noisy party. You're trying to have a conversation with a friend, but there's that constant hubbub of voices and background chatter. Despite the noise, you're able to focus on your friend's speech, on their words. You can carry on that conversation. But how does the brain actually make sense of speech in such a chaotic, noisy environment? So today, that's what I'm going to talk about, how our brain actually processes speech in background noise. A task that might seem simple, but actually it's a remarkable feat of auditory processing. And how in some cases, that very background noise is actually helping to improve our ability to understand speech. So sound, whether speech or noise, it travels in a waveform. Each sound has its own frequency and amplitude. When we hear someone speak, the sound waves carry that speech information to our ears. But so do the sound waves from background noises as well. In a noisy environment, those background sounds can mask the speech signal, making it much harder for our brain to pick up on the important speech sounds. But this is where the brain comes in. When sounds enter our ears, it travels through the auditory pathway, your outer ear, your middle ear, your inner ear. It reaches a part of your brain then called the auditory cortex. And this is where the basic processing begins. Speech comprehension involves more than just deciphering raw sound data. It's also about filtering and interpreting those sounds. And the brain has evolved to perform an extraordinary task which is called auditory scene analysis. It's this process that actually helps us to separate speech from background noise, but also to focus on the most important sound signals, speech signals. In fact, our brain has specialist mechanisms for this exact process. So when we're faced with really difficult listening environments, it's that process that helps us in that environment. The process starts in the cochlea, which is part of the inner ear. It's the cochlea that converts sound vibration into an electrical signals that are then sent to the brain. And it's from there the brainstem plays a key role in distinguishing speech from background noise. The brainstem essentially acts as a filter, amplifying the speech signal and reducing noise, making it easier for the brain to decode and focus on speech. Interestingly, background noise isn't always a hindrance. The brain can actually use noise to improve speech intelligibility in some cases. This phenomenon is known as the informational masking effect. So when background noise is somewhat predictable, such as a constant chatter or rhythmical sound, the brain can actually learn to anticipate and then filter out irrelevant sounds. This makes it easier to focus on a speech signal itself. In fact, mild to moderate levels of background noise can improve our ability to detect and process speech, especially when the brain has learned that noise, or use that noise, as a reference point. So this phenomenon is rooted in the brain's ability to adapt to noise. The brain's auditory cortex works dynamically to assign meaningful sounds. It tunes itself to better distinguish the speech from the overlapping background noise. In noisy environments, the brain uses fluctuating background noises to fill in gaps in the speech signal, enhancing speech perception through contextual cues. The brain actually tunes into certain frequencies in the speech signal that are less affected by the noise, making it much more intelligible. So this is part of what we call the spectral contrast enhancement, and that's where the brain's able to emphasize the difference in frequency between speech and background sounds. But there's also a cognitive element, a cognitive aspect that plays a part in this, and that is our attention. The frontal lobe helps us focus our attention on specific sounds. When we listen to speech in noise, we're essentially training our brain to ignore irrelevant sounds and focus on the voice that we're wanting to hear. Even in a noisy setting, the brain uses a process called top-down processing, and that involves actively tuning out irrelevant sounds whilst focusing on the speech that really matters. This allows us to engage in conversation without feeling overwhelmed or being overwhelmed by our noisy surroundings. However, it's not that easy. So as background noise increases, the brain really faces a greater challenge in that particular environment. And people with hearing loss or cognitive decline may find it even harder to process that noisy environment. The brain's ability to suppress background noise weakens, making it harder to understand speech. Even those without hearing impairment may feel quite fatigued after an extended period of time or exposure to noisy environments, as the brain is having to work so much harder to maintain its focus. Luckily, the brain has a remarkable ability to adapt through a process known as neural plasticity. So the brain can adjust its processing strategies, and with training or exposure, the brain can actually become even more effective and efficient at deciphering speech amongst noise. So this is why listening skills can improve with practice through interventions like auditory training. So processing speech in background noise is one of the brain's most impressive abilities. It requires a complex combination of auditory processing, attention, but also adaptation. In some cases, background noise isn't a barrier. It can actually improve the intelligibility of speech. So the next time you're in a noisy environment, just take a moment and think about what your brain is doing to help you understand what is being said. Thank you for joining me. Thank you.